Do you live here, Vance?
I just relocated here in October
Very cool.
this year.
And what was the first year that you came to Trinidad?
2017 Carnival Panorama season.
And that's when you was it your teacher that brought you here, or your teacher told you about it, and that's what encouraged you to come down here? Or neither, and something
Yeah,
else?
he always told us about Trinidad, and really his program focused quite a bit on the history of steel band music, and we'd play some really classic arrangements by some of the composers that are living composers. And there had been some of his students that had come before, and we'd heard the stories, and so we said, once we graduate, we're going to go. And there's a group of us that went. I think about 8 to 10. I forget how many. It was maybe up to 10 of us from Humboldt, Northern California.
Yeah.
And I graduated in the spring of 2016 with my undergrad. And we had a spring concert where we had a guest artist, Liam Teague,
Right.
who's one of the top steel pan players in the world and professor at Northern Illinois University. So he was a guest. At the time, he was arranging for Silver Stars. So we asked him to say, we want to come down. We'd like to play in your band. And he said, no problem, and I'll put you in contact with the management. And so we saved all our money summer of 2016, worked and saved all our money to budget this big trip, and then we all came down in like January of 2017, and that's a whole great story. Is like Humboldt is kind of a artist and musician, like hippie community way up in the bush, like in Northern California. And so we were a really tight group of college buddies, and so we were like crashing in a 1-bedroom apartment in St. Anne's. There was like 7 of us in a 1-bedroom apartment in St. Anne's, and there was like a bunk bed and a double bed in the bedroom, so like 4 people there, and then a bunk bed in the living room and a couch, and so like 3 people out there, 1 bathroom, no Wi-Fi.
And that was your first trip.
Yeah, that was my first trip, and we played in Silver Stars, and we just had an amazing experience, and I wanted to come back again the next year, and that year was like even better. And so I was like,
Were you with Silver Stars as well?
I had
Again?
at that point switched to phase 2, my
So-
second year,
Which was 2018.
which was 2018.
Right.
And there was a contingent of French steel pan players from a band called Calypso Association, which is a phenomenal steel band in Paris. And I had visited Paris in 2015, actually to study classical piano with a French piano teacher. And I heard there's a steel band there, so I wanted to check it out. And I made real good friends with them. So they were playing in phase 2 in 2017, and I visited, and I really liked the vibe in phase 2 because it was really rootsy, a lot of like elder penmen and women, and a lot of history there, and you could just feel the vibes, a lot of rastas, and the whole energy was just really enticing to me. So, and of course, Bugsy is a legendary musician,
Yes.
composer, arranger, and we had played a lot of his music in college. Our professor would give us sheet music that we'd have on music stands.
And you would play steel pan?
Yeah. The university I had a steel band.
Oh, that's
He established that steel band in 1986. It was the first one in California universities, and one of the very early ones in the United States universities.
That's amazing. I still find it fascinating how, American culture permeates, through the Caribbean. Of course, Trinidad is not immune to that. I've grown up here and I've felt it, but it's always really nice to hear when the Trinidad culture makes its way to the States,
Yeah.
whether it's food, music, or anything for that matter, carnival, anything, the art itself.
carnival. Yeah, and you hear so many interesting stories of there being a Trinidadian involved. Like,
that's nice. I mean, at the end of the day,
yeah.
it's as I was telling you just before we started, I've known a lot of people who've come to Trinidad, whether they had friends from university, came for, to experience carnival, and they ended up coming back every year, or they find the music, the food, or love in Trinidad very often, and it keeps people coming back. So I appreciate that. I appreciate that people appreciate Trinidad. I consider myself a patriot, and I love what Trinidad has to offer. I think that we're a little, off the trail, currently, with the unfortunate crime situation and all that. But
yeah, especially
so
even
much
more so nowadays. But that's actually one of the things that I kind of liked about it when I first came, was that it is somewhat off the beaten path as far as global tourism goes. Trinidad got very rich off of the oil industry in like the 80s and stuff like that. And then so the country was doing very well financially and didn't really have to make too much of an effort with the tourism economy.
Yeah.
So when you get to Trinidad, it's sort of like, all right, you're here, that's cool, but like, how do I get over there? Like, well, there's a maxi stand, or
yeah,
like, you just kind of had to figure it out. It's not all laid out, catered for you, like this all inclusive experience, like some of these resorts in St. Lucia or Barbados. Correct. and globally, like a lot of my friends in Northern California would travel to places like Costa Rica, Bali, Thailand, Mexico. Yeah. I mean, there's all of these, Vietnam, there's you hear these stories, Brazil, you hear these stories of people with all these amazing travel experiences, and you see on Instagram just so many pictures of these people in Bali or whatever, right? So Bali is like super on the map, and I'm sure it's a beautiful experience and a beautiful place, but Trinidad felt like sort of like a undiscovered gem. Like, what a gem. It's like everything's here, and you didn't have to wade through packs of like ugly tourists,
Yeah. And because you land here, and anywhere you go, it's not very touristy. We have tourist times, maybe around Carnival, you might experience a few, but it's, for the most part, you're right. It's Trinidadian.
Yeah,
everything is Trinidad.
I felt like it was a local experience, which is such a high priority for me when I travel. I find it so disgusting and really pointless to travel somewhere and spend the whole entire time in an all-inclusive resort and never get a chance. I flew to St. Lucia one time, and the whole airplane was couples on honeymoon or something. I was the only person on the plane that was like traveling by myself, a single person. And I talked to the people sitting next to me, and they said, yeah, we're like on a honeymoon, and do you have any advice? Because I'd been there before, to St. Lucia, and I said, yeah, go to find a local restaurant and like get acquainted with the chef and like ask them what's the kind of food that they do the best, and try these things out. And there's these nature destinations, these nice hikes, these waterfalls. And he said, well, we're staying in an all-inclusive resort, so like all the food and everything's like already arranged. And I'm like, that sounds boring. Like, are you kidding me? Like,
convenient, but convenience kills. I mean, this is something I used to say. Convenience kills creativity. In my acting, I used to say that.
Oh, yeah.
Don't if you're in a scene, if things are too convenient for you, you're never going to get to explore. And so I came up with convenience kills creativity. And so at the end of the day, because it's going to kill the imagination. You get to stay in your all-inclusive. It's nice. You get your drinks and your food, but you never get to experience the people, or, as you said, a restaurant of a chef that likes to cook something in particular.
Yeah, and the plot's all kind of laid out for you. There's no spontaneous. There's no space for spontaneity. And on top of that, what I find disgusting is the all-inclusive thing is like a neo-colonialism structure where foreign investors own these businesses, and upwards of 80%, sometimes upwards of 90% of the money that's coming in doesn't reach the local economy.
No.
So all of that money is going into leaving the country and going into bank accounts of foreign investors.
Yeah.
So this sort of ethical exchange is something that's really important to me, and something I keep very central with any of my trips. And like when I travel, like sometimes I come home and people ask like, how was vacation? And they don't really understand. They don't have a concept of what I'm really doing here. Like, I'm not drinking rum punch on the beach at an all-inclusive resort. Like, I'm walking through gritty Port of Spain to phase 2 where I'm rehearsing for like 6 to 8 hours a night,
Right.
up until like half 3 in the morning to do it again the next day. And it's hard work. It's a huge level of dedication. Just a massive commitment to playing a steel band in Trinidad. And I always came with the intention to study. Because when I finished my undergraduate degree in Northern California at Humboldt State University, we had a steel band called Humboldt Calypso Band.
Nice.
So anyone can go on YouTube and type in Humboldt Calypso Band, and there's a lot of really nice footage of us playing a lot of these amazing steel band classics and panoramas and stuff. So after I finished my undergraduate, some of my classmates went on to grad school to pursue their masters, but I had decided at that point I was a drummer and a pianist, classical pianist, when I entered the school before I was put on to steel pan. And I continued both percussion and piano studies. But I fell in love with pan, so I wanted to make pan my primary instrument. And there's not really not very many, very, very few institutions, universities that offer degrees in steel pan specifically. Some of them have programs, but even still, you're kind of getting second and third degree instruction away from the source. So if I wanted to study this art form on a serious level, the best thing to do would be to go to Trinidad and find the teachers, find the masters, and just
Work under them.
in a raw kind of independent education, because I've always thought that education and learning happens as a lifetime thing, right? So it's about a mindset. So if you enter into a space saying I'm doing this with the intention of for my education in this art form, then I don't really need somebody to give me a certificate at the end. It's about what you have up here. So I was really approaching it like as seriously as I'm going for graduate studies,
Right.
to study with these masters. And since then, this was back in 2017 was the first year, and I've come every single season. I've played every single panorama season since then, up to date this last panorama. But since that point, they've recognized Len Bugsy Sharp with an honorary doctorate and Ray Holman with an honorary doctorate. So it's fantastic to see these true masters being recognized appropriately for what they have achieved.
And a lot of times that recognition comes posthumously.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's nice that when they're recognized, when they're here, and they can appreciate the appreciation,
Mm-hmm.
Which I think is important, especially as people as significant culturally, the Calypsonians, the soca artists. I mean, there are definitely some soca artists. Marshall Montano's definitely, going to go down in history as one of the best to ever do it.
No doubt.
Without a doubt. And there's a few more on that list too. And so it's, he's been recognized, of course. But I think that when we start to go towards, soca is just such a commercialized industry, so it's easier, I guess, to recognize the significance. But when we go to like the lesser known or lesser advertised or encouraged art forms like calypso and pan, even though pan is huge, it's not. I don't think it's as big as it should be for being as culturally significant to Trinidad and Tobago as it is. But it's nice to see those guys getting recognized.
It sure is, and I think a lot of people. I think a lot of people in Trinidad probably don't have the perspective of how profound of a gift the steel pan was to the world of music. I mean, I have the extreme privilege to be able to, when I go back home, my family is all in South Dakota, which is where I grew up. I was born in Colorado and grew up in South Dakota on a Native American reservation. My parents were teachers, so I grew up on the Lakota Sioux, Cheyenne River Sioux reservation.
Very cool.
And whenever I go home, I play a gig in my hometown for friends and family and stuff, and there's always somebody who this is their first experience ever hearing a steel pan. And they are completely in awe and wowed and amazed by this instrument. And young and old, like cowboys, because this is cowboy country out there. Like, just people that you would never really imagine, like, being into steel pan, but as soon as they hear it, they're fascinated by it. They want to come up. They ask these questions. They want to see underneath of it, all these things, and they're always so grateful and appreciative that I came and shared it, right, and these things. So
it's a pretty happy instrument.
It is.
It's a pretty happy instrument. I mean, happy is kind of linear and singular, but it has an uplifting quality to it.
Uplifting is a great way to describe it. And that's actually one of the things, I mean, I think that affected me so deeply when I first heard it and then heard the story of how the pan came. Because in 1883, I believe, was the British passed a law called the Peace Preservation Act, which outlawed drums, the hand drums. So any wooden hand drums with skin heads, it was illegal to play, possess, or build.
They were trying to quell the, was it the art form between was it have anything to do with slavery?
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Right.
The kind of story I understand is that, like, the population between enslavers and enslaved was really quite out of proportion. So, and the drums was a thing that would bring the people together, right, and unify them and give them power, because music does that. Yes. And so they would see this collective energy, and they were afraid of that power. So in order to kind of squelch the culture, I mean, we've heard all these stories of how they dismantled their identities by not letting them speak their language, cutting off their hair, right, destroying their family units,
and then the music, of course.
Music, no. So it's
which was their gathering communication tool.
Yes, yeah. I mean a huge communication tool, even where they could, like, communicate through the drum with telling, like,
neighboring people what was going
somebody's
on.
Coming, stop doing what you're doing. Like, if you're doing something that they don't want you to be doing, or whatever. I don't like, this is kind of the story that I understand. So at that point, this is a group of oppressed people who has been they've tried to be silenced. The colonizers took away their drum, but they refused to be silent. And you can take away the drum, but you can't silence the music out of the people. You can't take away the music out of the people. So they found other ways to express themselves. And what started out as a rhythmic thing through tambu bamboo and these sort of things, it was just rhythmic, slowly evolved into this melodic thing, a melodic instrument. And by the time they got all the different voices in the orchestra, a beautiful harmonic ensemble. So I'm hearing the sound of the steel orchestra, and knowing the story of all the hardship and oppression and resistance in order to express this sound that I'm hearing that is so beautiful and so uplifting. The melodies and the rhythm is so groovy. It just fills your body with this joy, and you want to move, and it's so rich and sweet.
Yeah.
It's like, how did something so sweet come out of something so dark?
Yeah.
And that was just like such a beautiful thing to me, and it hit me in such a profound way, I think, because my upbringing was on a Native American reservation, and they went through oppression and hardships and maintained their culture through all of this, and they're still there today, you know, with these traditions that go back ancient times.
And just to kind of touch on what you said, where it kind of started where the drums were taken away, and they started the tambo bambo beating the bamboo drum in a kind of a rhythmic. It was more rhythmic.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of rhythmic before it became melodic with the biscuit tin drum that was able to then be tuned. And it's actually interesting how that evolution went. It's not to say, because a bamboo is vastly different from the pan that we have today. But
right.
but the beating of the bamboo encouraged the drumming art form to continue, which then encouraged the evolution of the instruments themselves.
Yeah, and it was all about the materials they had access to, right?
Yeah.
So it's about upcycling, repurposing. It has these sort of qualities to it as well, right?
Car rims, garbage tins. The biscuit tins that used to come from I believe the UK or Europe.
Yeah.
And they were big square tins that they would then tune the top of it, or became, I guess, as they beat it, as the top of it became more dented, and then the tones changed. I'm just assuming this. I should really know this a little bit more accurately.
No, you're actually kind of like spot on there. This is the story that I've heard told, is that it was on accident that they discovered it at first, because they were playing the biscuit tin, and after playing it so long, dented it, and then realizing you were getting, if you hit it over here, it's one sound, and if you hit it over there, you're getting a different sound. So then they started intentionally manipulating the shape in order to get desired pitches, and they started refining that. So that's evolution.
And then because of our oil industry, we had the oil drums that they were like, well, if it's going to work on this, that bigger, more dense metal might hold the shape more. And I'm assuming that's how we got
Correct
there.
is right.
Yeah.
And the man who's credited with that sort of part of the evolution is a man named Elie Manette,
right?
Who was with Invaders way back in the earlys, and the 20s and the 30s. He passed away, I believe it could have been 2019 or 20 kind of time. And he was in his early 90s, like 93. And he was tuning all the way up until the end. He was building and tuning pans all the way up until the end. And he has some of the nicest, most refined instruments ever built, and did so much for the evolution of the steel pan. But yeah, I believe he, is sort of credited. There's a bunch of different stories, and it's really, the steel pan was invented by a community,
right,
of people over the course of time. So you can't really pinpoint one person invented this
at this
day.
time. Yeah,
it didn't happen like that. It happened from 1883 to like we were saying, the 40s.
The early 40s.
So that's a period of 50 to 60 years that it evolved into what we know as the modern instrument now. But and it was illegal to use the oil drums. It's like they had to sneak into the yards at dark, and if they were caught, they were punished in these kind of things.
Yeah, apparently, I mean, the laws behind some of it. I mean, you could not beat the tambo bamboo unless the bamboo was grown in your yard.
Imagine.
So the bamboo had to be grown in your yard in order for you to cut it.
But you're only allowed 4 plants.
But yeah. I like that.
Yeah,
but yeah, so it's on all those, and it became where people started stealing the tops of the garbage cans to turn into, because you outlaw the drums, you know, these absurd laws, and then they started chaining the tops of the garbage cans to the garbage bin, and there are some famous pictures from the 30s and the 40s, and in the background you can see the chains on the garbage cans, and it's because of the time of the steel drum. Yeah.
You see, I didn't even know about that stuff.
Yeah,
but
and we only learned that. Cameron and I only learned that when we were researching for this film we were writing. I almost felt like, as I was learning so much about it, I almost felt like ashamed that I did not know this. And then I thought back to my education here, and where it was very good. I'm actually very happy and with my education that I received in Trinidad in secondary school and whatnot. I didn't learn those things. And I think that those are things that we should know in order to appreciate the evolution of our culture, musically in this way, but the evolution of our culture. I think we should also know the evolution of our culture as far as food and cuisine.
Because how did we end up with doubles?
You know, I mean, those stories are, because of its doubles, it's a little more known. But I mean, the Chinese influence, the Indian influence, the African influence, the Syrian Lebanese influence, the Spanish influence. I mean, we are literally the melting pot of melting pots. That's how I look at Trinidad.
From the northeast, south, and west.
Yeah, no matter where you are.
All to here.
Yeah.
All these parts of the globe. Yeah. I mean, it's so unique in that sense, even amongst other Caribbean islands, right? Like you don't see quite as much diversity all mashing up together.
Very true.
And the country's not huge geographically, and the population's not huge.
Yeah.
So you have so many pieces of the whole world within this one little zone.
That's true. And it's not new either.
Right.
I mean, this is going back 100 and something years that all the cultures have pretty much been here. 130 years, 140 years. Because I know probably one of the last ethnicities to come here was probably the Syrian Lebanese. And that was 130 years ago plus, like 1890.
So these are literally like third and fourth generation.
Absolutely.
And beyond.
Of every culture.
Of all these
the
cultures.
Chinese, of course the African, the East Indians, the Spanish influence, and the Latin American and Southern American influence. I mean, it's been here for hundreds of years.
With like parang music and this Venezuelan, that
absolutely,
that's not a recent thing.
That's why we are we are literally the melting pot of melting pots in every aspect.
And there is quite a bit of harmony here, despite what crime this country does deal with and that kind of thing. I find for all these different people living in very close proximity that there's quite a bit of harmony.
Yeah.
Would you agree?
I do agree. Not to get too political, but I've always said that, and of course, these things exist, and I'm not saying that it doesn't exist or that we exist in a vacuum, but I've always said that Trinidad does not have a race problem. Trinidad has a class problem. And I can say that with some form of confidence because I went to school here. I sat down next to and in between every complexion and of skin color there is. And we were all friends, and we play carnival next to each other. I see a lot of the harmony, and I think that a lot of the problems we have are, wrapped in politics for various gains. But I think we have a class problem. But that's another story.
Yeah,
I love how we've been able to exist despite the small influences of very clear racism that are very real. But I think that we, for the most part, are a very harmonious society. I mean, if you look around, there are not a lot of places that have this sort of diversity that are as, we're going to use it again, harmonious. And we exist. There's a lot of coexisting that happens. I grew up
in the States, and the history of America with race relations is a really complex and dark and horrendous kind of thing.
Yeah.
So
that lasted a long time.
That lasted a long time, and we're still really dealing with stuff that we haven't acknowledged. Like, we tried to sweep it under the rug and say we fixed the racism's over or something like that,
Right.
but like, it's undeniable now. It's like no one could pretend like
I
that we
think
still
it's-
have issues we got to work through.
Yeah, it's yeah. I think that there's, especially with recent events. I mean, I think it's very clear that people feel a certain way, and you know, the United States was created and built in a completely different way than Trinidad was created and built. A lot less of the foundation was built on racism and the exploitation of racism. Trinidad, whereas they were, you know, of course we had indentured servitude and those sorts of things happening. I think that was more of an economic thing. But of course, race obviously played a part. I mean, you can't deny that. So,
Right. You're right. Well, you had these colonial systems, colonizers, and these sort of things. But you know, it's pardon me. What I always try to keep in mind is Trinidad is just over 60 years old as an independent nation, right? And the United States is getting up somewhere about 250. So, you know, some of these things just take time to work through.
Yeah.
As a country.
Yeah.
So, Trinidad's very young. I know panmen who were born prior to 1962.
Yeah.
They were born into a British colony.
Yeah.
They had British colonizer, like
Government systems, and school
schools,
systems,
and police. And, you know what I'm saying? So these panmen in the 40s and the 50s, like, this is the environment that they were functioning in, and
Yeah, we had British immigration officers in the 30s. You know, in the 40s, we had British immigration officers. When you came here, it was a
right.
If
If you came as a visitor,
yeah, so I mean, at the end of the day, it was very much part of the the British influence was here. I mean, it wasn't just kind of on the sides. On the side, it was very much a part of the culture and the life here.
Right. Yeah, and you still really see a lot of those remnants, like with the legal system, the government system, and so those are some things that I feel like the country will work through and develop more efficient ways. Is sort of like trying to fit a square peg in a circle hole. Yeah, like how to enter government buildings you need to wear these like business suit type of attire. Like they need to sort of update that, because
you can't show your shoulders in a government building.
We're in the tropics.
Yeah, you can't wear short pants in a government building.
Yeah, that happened to me the first time I went. I was wearing sandals, short pants, and like a cut off. They were like, no, you can't.
Sorry,
I said,
you've
"What?"
broken 3 laws.
But I think another thing that I find really profound about and inspiring about the steel band art form, and phase 2 in particular, which I played with every season since 2018, was like in the 1970s with the Black Power movement and stuff. Stokely Carmichael or Kwame Ture was a massive influence in the Black Power movement in the United States, and in with the Black Panthers and stuff in the 70s. And there's a lot of all the way, going back to like Marcus Garvey, Jamaican Pan-African in the 30s and the 20s in like New York and stuff. So there's Caribbean and West Indian culture has had an influence in American political history and stuff for a significant impact for kind of throughout all these times. And in the 70s in Trinidad, there's an old photograph on the Trinidad and Tobago like National Archives that I just saw with a sign that said "Indians and Africans Unite Now," and this was this sort of coalition movement that was happening in the 70s, demanding more equal access to employment opportunities and these sort of things. So I found that really powerful, because especially going into this election season in Trinidad now, they try to divide and conquer, right? This is the long time strategy that we've seen.
That we took from the British.
Right.
The British perfected it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And that's like Steel Band is a place where all those barriers are broken down, like age, race, gender. It doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter where you're born.
Doesn't matter where you're born, which part of the world.
Yeah.
In phase 2, this panorama season, we have players from Japan, France.
Japanese love soca and calypso.
Love it. Anybody
who experiences it, nobody's gonna hate that type of music. It's too. I used uplifting before, but it is a positive feeling music, even though it may carry some very strong emotions. It's a very positive and uplifting type of music.
Absolutely. There's a joy that it taps in.
I'm curious now, because I've wanted to ask you this before, but 2017,
right?
Take us back to walking into your first. You performed, but take us going back to your first panorama. I mean, walking in and seeing that. I don't know if you performed first, second, last. I'm sure you'll tell us, but stepping into that, seeing what the performance was like. Rehearsals, I'm sure, is a magical thing in itself. I'm an actor. Rehearsing for a play is a really beautiful thing.
Right.
And then performing that play is a really beautiful thing. Is it similar?
So, we arrived the week before prelims, so we had a week to learn our music. And then in prelims, as you know, the judges come to the yards, and then they go from yard to yard. They perform for the judges. The first night we were in the pan yard. The pan yard is a special place. The first night we were in the pan yard, and hearing the power of the steel orchestra, with full of these, like, the Trinidadian players are all so talented. And Silver Stars had a lot of young people, and they're doing these crazy technical lines, and everyone's hitting the rhythm. The rhythm is so tight. The bass pans and the background pans. In bands in the States, we don't have as much background pans. They're kind of a little more top heavy, just because logistics, storage. Yeah. The bass pans are huge, and you're never gonna see like 9 or 12 bass in the States. So having a section of like 12 basses and hearing that power and that tightness was, pore raising. It was just absolutely pore raising, and kind of intimidating, because you're like, I'm supposed to fall into this group and learn all these notes and play all these notes, but we got it down. And now, and as the season goes, you have the prelims, then you have semifinals and finals, which are both in the Savannah. So semifinals would have been my first experience crossing the Savannah stage, and it's kind of mind-boggling for a first-time experience to witness the amount of effort it takes to transport an entire panorama band to the Savannah, roll the whole thing onto the stage, set up, play, or roll it off, and then the scale of how many other bands are there doing the same thing is so massive. And so the energy is just building and building and building the whole time you're going down the track. And then when it comes up to when you're on deck, now the other band is playing on stage, and you're next, and you can't practice anymore. The band can't do any runs
Correct.
anymore. So the next run you're gonna take is on the stage, and you hear the count off, and it's like now or never. It's like focus to your best and execute to the highest level you possibly can, because this is the moment.
This is it. And
it really, at this point, you've done so many reps with the band where your hands are just moving. Like, you don't have to think about what's the next note anymore. The steel pan, the steel pan is very much like a choreography, like a dance. There's all these shapes, these body positions that you go. So you kind of, once all the shapes go into your body like remembers the choreography, and every position is associated with the sound that you're making with it and stuff. So the train is going and it's not stopping, and you just gotta, ride that wave all the way to the end. And you fall in love with this music. You know every single part so intimately because you're rehearsing it every day and hearing all the parts every day. So
I've actually never heard it described like that, where it's sort of a choreography and the shapes that your body takes to hit certain combination of notes or in times or whatever runs. I've never heard it described like that, and I think I'm looking at it a little bit differently now, because when you see people play, there is a very, can't even say a small bit, there's a large part of it that does look effortless, to be honest with you, because people are moving. And one thing about pan players is that everybody's always smiling, which in my experience, I mean, I'm sure there's people that aren't smiling, but everybody's always smiling and enjoying themselves. And watching somebody enjoy themselves is a nice thing, but do something so complex and beautiful at the same time while enjoying yourself is a very pleasant thing for an audience to feel and experience. And I've never seen somebody play pan and be in a bad mood.
Yeah, right? Well, this is, I think, one of the starkest contrasts to a steel orchestra versus a classical orchestra is when you see a classical orchestra, everyone has music stands, and then there's a conductor. But when they're playing, they're not they're pretty focused, and you could, if you look at their faces, you can tell that they're enjoying themselves and stuff. But when you see a steel orchestra, there's no music stands, and the way people are grooving, the way they're physically moving and grooving. I mean, first of all, the groove is just so hard. I mean, it's just like how is it that cool? Like, how is it that cool? And then you see the people doing it, and they look so cool. They look like they're having the best time. They're so happy, and the thing is, like, all the parts you see the row of tenors. If you look down the row of tenors, they're all moving in unison together. It's like you can visually see the coordination of the orchestra as like an entity, and it's like kind of mystifying, especially for a non-player, to see, like, when you watch a tenor player, like their hands just might do this, and you're hearing all of that, and you're like, how'd you get all that out of just like
one move,
one little kind of gesture? And there's like a magic trick that happens. And for a player, when you watch another player, like you can see it and you understand it, but for like a non-player, it is mystifying. Like
it is a beautiful thing.
It looks magic. You're like,
we went out. My fiance and I went out to taking some pan before Carnival, and even watching the rehearsals, even watching just a part of the band rehearse, because sometimes some parts of the band are chatting or eating, and then another part of the band just happens to be rehearsing or doing a part.
Yeah, the low pan kind of thing, or the high pan.
I love watching the rehearsals. I think it's because of my acting background, but I love watching rehearsals because it's that exploration. I think I have probably more often than not, I have more fun rehearsing than performing. Well, obviously, there's a lot less pressure and stuff, but in rehearsals, you can fully explore without consequence, if you will.
Well, yeah, when I was talking about being on the stage and it's like now or never, you got to focus. There's a certain amount of pressure.
Yeah,
right?
Of course.
Which you're taking it serious. This is your one run, so that's what's going on. But yeah, you're right. There's a kind of a freedom to just open your soul completely to the art.
Yes.
In a rehearsal.
Yeah.
And to dive deep like that.
And try something new every so often. I mean, maybe as a pan player, as an ensemble player, you may have less freedoms, but because you're playing with under a composer or a conductor, in a line of a group of tenor pans or bass pans or whatever. And so yeah, I guess in acting it might be a little bit different in that respect, but I can see how rehearsing for music. I mean, I grew up playing piano, and several other instruments in the marching band. I grew up in South Florida.
Okay.
So I grew up in the marching band playing the vibraphone, the marimba, all the percussion instruments, the quads, the snare drum, all that stuff in the marching band. And so we have that in common, the percussion, the love for percussion instruments.
Right.
I didn't continue it. I went the science route, went to pre-med and then dropped out of pre-med and went to acting school. So
back to art.
But back to art, yeah. But I feel like when there's less pressure, when there's, I guess, less consequence of this, you can mess up. You can mess up in a performance too, because 9 out of 10 times the audience isn't even going to pick up on the mistake because they're not attuned to what you're attuned to in that particular piece. I've dropped lines in a play, and I'll come backstage and be like, oh, I missed a line in this in Act 2, and they'll be like, oh, I didn't notice,
right?
But you notice as the
you know
performer.
what it's supposed to be.
Yeah,
they
exactly.
don't know what
they don't know it's supposed to be.
Right.
But yeah, when you take that pressure off, it's a nice thing to just play the ass, I guess.
I totally agree. The most fun is the rehearsals.
Yeah.
And when we get right before a stage, I almost start to get a little bit sad, like on a finals night.
Because it's over.
Because I know that 8 minutes on stage is going to be over in the blink of an eye. Like, by the time you open your eyes after the first blink, you're hitting the last note. Like, well, another thing I want to say about that stage is you kind of reach a transcendental state.
Automatic. Autopilot.
It's kind of flow state.
Yeah.
Kind of a thing, because like I said, you've done so many hundreds of reps over the course of the season that you're not thinking about it anymore. Everybody is channeling on that level simultaneously. So there's like a collective energy thing that the band is achieving, and that when you're part of that sound and you get into that flow state, and it's like a transcendental experience, and all of a sudden it's over. Like, it just whizzes right by. So right before, the stage, or like the day of finals and stuff, I'm realizing to myself that the season's over. Like, we don't have another rehearsal. There's never going to be a time when this group of people plays this composition ever again. Ever.
You might get lucky and play something after the season, but that might be.
Yeah, people already went home.
Yeah, that's true.
Like, you're never going to get
be
that
the same group
collective
of people.
ever again, which sucks. And I mean, because you work so hard.
But isn't that part of the beauty of the collaborative spirit?
Yes.
Is that it doesn't stick around.
Right.
It comes, you experience it fully. Hopefully, if you're lucky, you get to experience it fully. But then it's gone.
Yeah.
When we make a movie, when we make a play, when we perform a play, put on a play, you experience that so fully.
Right.
But then you'll never ever experience that again.
Right. There's a really beautiful quality to that. Because you have to be there.
Yeah.
That's the only way.
It's the only way to actually know. And then which puts people which puts as a performer explaining that feeling to people. There's no explaining it. There's no explaining. You can only explain that it is unexplainable.
Yeah, that's all you could say. Yeah. And when I go back to the States and try to tell people about my experiences, it's almost like waking up from a dream
and trying to tell somebody
and
what
trying
it was
to.
like.
It's like man, just because there's so many like contextual nuances about what it is, what it feels like to be in Trinidad that is different from what it feels like to be in the States. It's like, well, first, like, how do you explain like the nuts man to somebody? Like, how do you explain like the corn soup man to somebody? Like, they wouldn't, you can explain what it is, but like to understand what that is in the vibe of the whole atmosphere, like you, once you see it and get a corn soup, then you understand.
Or I was gonna say, you know, you can explain how well the rehearsal went and how well the music went, but walking to the pan yard, getting a doubles on your way with a group of friends, you know, chatting up with somebody that you may meet at the double stand, walking there. I mean, there's that's very much part of Trinidad and Tobago. I mean, the interaction with the people really is what I guess is what I'm getting.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The music is what brought me here. And I would say the people are what made me fall in love with this place. I mean, the people are so charming. Everything about it, the way they talk, the way they tell stories.
Yeah, we are storytellers for sure.
I mean, there is the talent, the artistic talent, the musical talent, and just the intellectual talent in whatever field you find these people going into.
We have everybody, whether it's sports, culinary, the arts. I mean, from painting,
Sciences.
music, everything. Scientists. We have it's everybody. We have incredibly talented, resourceful people.
Yeah. It's so cool. It's so cool. It's, you know, and it's just an honor for me to be a part of this community, and I feel fully embraced by the country.
I'm glad to hear that.
And I feel like, you know, music was sort of my passport to get in, and because I have that connection, when people meet me for the first time, they say, "Oh, you play pan? Oh, with Phase 2?" And then from that point on, it's like, all right, respect. Like we understand that there's a love and a respect. Yeah. And music is one of the best mediums, I think. Food too, for sure, but I think music is one of the like best mediums for cross-cultural sharing, because you don't have to necessarily speak English like when the Japanese come to experience the beauty of that culture. When you hear the music, like music transcends language in these ways where there's an emotional communication, like from spirit to spirit that goes on, and it kind of sets off the exchange with a tone of appreciation right off the bat.
I've always said, because I do have a background with music, but I've always said that if you want to see true connection, if you want to see two human beings, or a group, but two human beings connect on a level that is not a normal day-to-day experience, watch two strangers improv, like improvise music, whether it's piano, guitar, whatever it is. Watch two people improvise music, and you know, good musicians can kind of keep that flow going and that improvisation going. It is a super beautiful thing to watch two people collaborate in that way, and it's always taught me that music is greater than language, because it's almost, you don't have to explain it. You don't have to explain music. You can listen to music and feel it. You may not be able to articulate how you're feeling, but you're feeling the music.
It's so direct.
Yes,
like it's just,
absolutely.
It happens.
Absolutely.
Know, yeah.
You know, Tesla did say, Nikola Tesla did say that, you know, if you want to understand, I'm going to butcher this quote as I do every quote. If you want to understand the universe, think in vibration and frequency. And of course, music is only vibration and frequency. So it's you know, I think that music is music is a universal constant. We didn't invent music. You know, we maybe invented chord progressions, and particular chord progressions. But I don't
Yeah.
think we invented music. I mean, music is
even
it's around.
even that I don't know if I would call inventing as much as kind of happening upon.
Discovering.
Yeah, because it's like there's a set of frequencies that agree together that are consonant.
Yeah.
And then when you put an order of these different kind of combinations of frequencies, they agree. They agree. Like there's, I mean, maybe a man like Bach. They like people really like think Bach was some sort of an alien or something because he was so tapped in
To music,
to the
and
cosmos. Like it was like he was channeling these supernatural, like superhuman level of musical intelligence and
understanding of what goes with what.
and he was so prolific. He pumped out so much music, and he sort of like established systems that are still used up to this day. And like any of the greats, like the Beatles or all throughout all these centuries, use the same kind of systems that were essentially established by Bach. So you have these really special people, but even that I see as like him. He was tapped in and channeling some sort of like universal truths.
Yes.
Like
yeah.
you know, there's music is like we don't think about things being magic. Like when you think about something being magic, you think it's like
a trick
or something that is like not physically possible, but it all kind of depends on how you look at it. And like I sort of see musicians as complete masters of manipulating sound and frequency in a way that it's like you're getting a piece of iron to sing like this amazing sound
that not just you can feel, listeners can feel.
Yeah,
viscerally.
and then what it does to them, like to their bodies and their hearts and minds and
Absolutely.
stuff. You know, it's like there's a amazing energy with all that. But you know, using that energy, I think the intention that you're coming in with has a lot to do with the outcome and the effect that your music ends up having. And my goal with my music, especially in Trinidad, is like growing up on a Native American reservation in South Dakota. I was like in the minority, being a white person amongst the indigenous community. And this is from when I was like 5 years old and stuff. So I wasn't really aware of the concept of race yet. My family didn't really tell me
the dynamics,
race and the history of racism and these things. And like, so I was always taught that, these members of our community, we were all friends, and to love everybody just like you love yourself, like family and stuff like that. So I had Native friends and all these things growing up. And then later when I learned about colonial history, first I learned a lot about the colonial history from the perspective of the indigenous people while I was growing up there. And then when I got to college and stuff and took different critical race theory courses in Native American history and U.S. history and stuff, and learned about all these things, like at that level, it was really disturbing to me and something I felt intimately connected to through my upbringing and wanted to be part of the healing of that. So when I come make music in Trinidad, it's about like a unity, like a transcending whatever different boundaries that we've had, and creating a unified place where when we play in a band, we acknowledge that it's a collective energy, and you become part of one sound, the whole band. So all these parts become one, and so that oneness and that unity is like a conscious thing for me when I take part in this, and it's kind of with an intention of being part of this post-colonial healing that like actively fight colonialism and the traumas that we're still dealing with in this post-colonial era.
The divide,
Mm-hmm.
I guess, is an overarching way of referring to it. Yeah.
Right. And so people in the States, when they see me being part of this, I hope that shows them that, like, multiracial harmony, they look an example.
Yeah.
Like, I hope people here see me and think, oh, not all Americans are crazy like what I see on TV. Like, I met this guy and he was cool. Like,
that's true.
So that's like a very central part of like my mission when I do these musical trips, is to be a part of the positive future. You know what I'm saying?
So what's carnival season just finished? What's next for yourself?
So I just completed a 2-year music program. I went back. Actually, I want to take it back to Carnival 2020. Because that year, my plan was to go play Carnival that year, and then I was going to try to go back to grad school at that point. I had been coming 17, 18, 19, 20.
Right.
And then I was thinking it'd be nice to go back, and I wanted to work on improvisation on a steel pan as a soloist in a solo voice, like in an ensemble. And there's one school there's 3 universities in the States where you can study steel pan as your primary instrument, and one of those being George Mason University in Northern Virginia, just outside of Washington, D.C. And the professor there, named Victor Provost, is one of the world's leading soloists on tenor pan, and he's phenomenal. So my plan was to try to go to that school that following fall, but as you know, COVID hit, and I was in Trinidad right after Carnival, and I made the decision to stay. When they closed the borders, it was like either go now or stay, and I made the decision to stay and ride it out here for a while. I was thinking it might be like the summertime or something. And now, understand this, I was like 29 years old in 2019 when I came right before Christmas that year as a 29-year-old in 2019. I ended up staying in Trinidad, and I didn't leave until like September, October in 2022 as like a 31-year-old. Like I spent like 2 Christmases, 2 old years, 2 Easters, 2 summers, like all this time passed, turned 30, turned 31, like, and I'm still in Trinidad. And it was okay because I got to play with Phase 2, when in between the times when we didn't have lockdowns and curfews and stuff, and 5-person minimum gatherings and these sort of things. But finally, after that, I finally decided it was the time to go back to school. I didn't want to go to school during COVID, especially studying music, how our ensemble's going to meet if it's, so
restricted.
So the time was right now, I felt like. So I went back and did a 2-year master's program in jazz studies, studying steel pan improvisation in with the jazz, like bebop language and stuff. So I had a really fantastic education there, and I just finished up with that last spring, 2024. And so at that point, I applied with the Ministry of Education in Trinidad for a music instructor position. And so over the summer, I came for an interview, got a phone call a few months later, and they said, we processed your application. We'd like to offer you the position. Right. Come down. So I came down in October, and I had to prepare a whole bunch of documents for my work visa, and the ministry had to prepare a bunch of documents for my work visa. And so I submitted all that stuff to national security and all this. Long story short, my work visa is still pending. So unfortunately, I haven't been able to start this music instructor position yet, but hopefully that's going to kind of wrap up here soon. Good. And my plan is to be based here in Trinidad full time now. Excellent. Working as a music instructor and then also as like a performer. Yeah. And steel band performer as well. So playing solo and steel band.
When does the season start for you guys? Rehearsals and I guess the gatherings, the initial gatherings.
So Panorama season more or less officially starts right after All Years.
Okay.
So they had their Christmas and then All Years thing, and then pretty much that first week of January is when Panorama season starts. But the stage side group, which is the small band that will play functions throughout the year, rehearses right through the year. So phase 2 rehearses on Tuesday and Thursday nights. Regular. Like tonight, I'll go to rehearsal.
Very cool.
And we play gigs, different events and stuff like that. Yeah. And that group is maybe like, 25 to 35 players. Right. Whereas a Panorama band is, the maximum is supposed to be 125. Which this is a really funny thing, is that there's maximums. Yeah. Because that means that more people are trying to play than that. Yeah. And they have to put a limit
on how big the band can be. But it would be because you if there was not a limit, I could see people rolling up with a few hundred people. And literally you'd be hearing it from San Fernando.
Yes. Yeah. You would think in most settings where you're trying to get like 125 people in an ensemble, like 125 would be like the number you're trying to reach. Yeah, like you're trying to.
We can get to 125.
You're trying to make phone calls to reach that number, when it's like the opposite.
You have to unfortunately tell people.
Yeah, they drop
next year.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So
that's part of it, though.
I mean, that's it's part of it, and people with a good attitude understand. Take it with grace.
Of course.
Other people with good attitudes also, like. It is. No one wants that to happen.
No, of course not.
It takes a hit to your ego, and luckily I've never been dropped. But there's no one that's safe.
Because if you think about, this is Panorama. Pan is regarded as, culturally, it's probably one of our most significant cultural instances in time that has lasted, and of course proliferated throughout the globe. But I think it's something that should be taken seriously. Well, and I think it should be a meritocracy to a degree of being able to perform and talent and right. Not just that, but discipline and reliability.
Yes,
and all those things.
Yes.
You could be really good, but if you don't show up to rehearsal, it's going to be hard for you to make the team.
Yep.
It doesn't matter if it's football, basketball, or pan.
Well, and that's the thing is like I kind of acknowledge and regard these big bands. They're like Port of Spain alone, and Woodbrook has like so many of these. It's like really the hub, like the global mecca of this thing. But like the Boston Symphony Orchestra or like the London, these are the nation's like top orchestras. So it's like there's a level of respect and professionalism that needs to be expected, absolutely. But talking about acknowledging that, and you were talking about your education in school at the time you went through school. Just only very recently, the other day, they finally passed government documents to recognize the steel pan as the national instrument officially.
That hasn't been done yet? But it just
got done the other day. And that is the most common answer. When people said this needs to be officially thing, and people would say
it's not yet.
That's not it yet, because I thought it was. Like
That's
most
crazy.
people understood it as that, which it is, but for some reason, whatever paperwork at the time before, like, never got fully processed or something. Just
Well,
like,
it's now on our coat
of arms and stuff.
So it's there now.
Which I love. I love that. Some people are talking this and that about it, and it's like, the thing is, like, yeah, it'll be phased in. They're not gonna do it overnight and have to send in everything and fix it one time. It's phased in, but like, definitely, like, to remove the colonizer ships and put a symbol of national identity from this culture makes total sense to me. And we're going through a lot of that same thing in the United States with trying to replace statues of colonizers and stuff like that with other things, which which is really good. No one wants to be walking around in like the South in America and see a statue of Robert E. Lee, like the Confederate dude who like led the opposition
against
in the Civil War. Like
the North, for the North.
How is that gonna make black people feel?
Yeah,
like in that town. Like, we can learn about that history. So, but these moves that are being made, like with the coat of arms and the national instrument, like I had a very kind invitation to take part in a carnival event at one of the elementary schools here as a guest performer this year. And their whole presentation was about the history of the steel pan and how it evolved, and they had like little skits and history and music, and I was like, wow, this is great. Like, and they talked about that it's officially the national instrument, and so these are like little kids now kind of getting maybe some of the story that you weren't getting when
and
you
it'll
were
be
in
good.
school.
It'll be good. I mean, I think that there definitely pushes to get that more of that cultural identity more known, widespread, even though it should almost automatically be. But I'm glad that it feels like there's a push, and you're telling me now. So. And
another really exciting piece of news is they just announced some sort of government funding and initiative for a steel pan tuning and building apprenticeship to train a whole set of next generation builders and tuners, which I can't tell you how happy that made me when I read that, because there's such a high demand and shortage for people working in that field. There's like only a handful, and there's so many pans in Trinidad that need to be better maintained in the world. There's so much work in that field to be done, and there's just a real shortage of people able to do it. So
that's a good point.
So this is a really good career for, I mean, there's a lot of work to be done. This is like a serious career for a lot of the future
preservation of the instrument and the art form itself
and the expansion of it. I mean, there's so much room to grow, and so I'm very much looking forward to seeing the people fill those shoes and start to next generation come up.
But this is I mean, I normally learn a lot when I have these conversations on this podcast, but this one was exceptionally informative. I you know what's I don't want to say sad, but I want to use that word, is that it's a foreigner, no disrespect, teaching me, a Trinbagonian, quite a bit about my own culture that I didn't even know, which is a beautiful thing in itself. Right. It just shows how vast our culture is and how widespread it has reached.
Yeah, and how much it's impacted people from very far places. Absolutely. Like a place like South Dakota. Like, this culture has impacted my life in such a way where I've, went to great lengths to really study and make this music part of my life and these kind of things. But, this is you're not the first Trinidadian that's told me like, wow, I've like learned stuff about steel band history from a foreigner of all people and these sort of things. But like, I think this happens. I think this could happen with anybody. I know that there's musical art forms in America, like maybe like let's say country music, that I think probably even people in Trinidad could teach me about. And I know that there's people from other places in the world that would know more about certain parts of American culture than I would. So everybody has their little things that they're just completely nerd out about.
Yeah,
and
passionate
and make them
obsessed with the
so
different things,
excited, obsessed with. And so my roommate actually kind of coined me a little nickname, the Pan Piang.
The Pan Piang. I like that.
Because I'm a Piang when it comes to Pan.
I'm going to remember that for next time. But thank you so much for coming on, Vance. This has been a way better than I guess a lot of conversations that we have with music and stuff. It's, but to hear somebody so passionate about the music, about the culture, and appreciate it so much, I appreciate that you appreciate it so much.
Well, thank you so much.
I guess that's the only way that I can put it.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me to have this conversation. It was my complete pleasure, and sometimes we got to connect, and I'll carry you by the Phase 2 pan yard for a rehearsal.
Cameron, you hear that? Right? We'll be running on the run we'll go and shoot an episode in Phase 2.
Oh, there we go.
I like that.
There we go.
Thanks so much again, Vance.
That'd be great. Yes,
cheers, brother.
Cheers.